Y'all know what it is.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is sales and mindset coach Isaac Ho. Isaac has pioneered an approach to coaching that not only addresses sales and mindset skills, but also includes an emotional and physical health aspect that has helped his clients achieve double to triple their income, all while maintaining peace of mind both inside and outside their business. From his early days as a 17-year-old health coach at the YMCA to owning his own gym at 22, always the consummate professional, Isaac's developed a passion for helping people achieve what he calls unsolvable problems. He's discovered that a key factor in achieving goals is being mentally and physically healthy, and that is every bit as important as skill development. He's committed his life to moving entrepreneurs out of overwhelm and fatigue, helping them instead to create lifestyles of freedom and joy. Joining us today for a conversation with topics ranging from overcoming burnout and mastering high-ticket sales to building a seven-figure business without sacrificing your physical or mental well-being. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Isaac Ho. Hey, Isaac, how are you?
I'm well, man. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing well. Hey, thanks for joining us. This is a conversation that I'm looking forward to. Actually, Mike and I were talking a little bit before the show. There's some business stuff going on in my world specifically that is very applicable to the kind of work you do. So we're really excited to just kind of talk about it. And I think, given sort of your ability to help entrepreneurs and me being one, we might even be able to sort of do kind of a real life role play here or something. So it could be really
cool. That'd be perfect. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
So Isaac, before we get going, let's get a little bit about your background. You're from Lakewood, Washington. Is that correct?
Yeah, I currently live in Lakewood, Washington. I grew up, my dad was actually in the Air Force. He was an Air Force physician. So I was actually born in Ogden, Utah, over there by base.
McCord Air Force Base is where you ended up.
Yeah, I ended up at McCord.
Yeah, I'm a Washington native, grew up just on the other side of the bridge in Gig Harbor. So you're in my stomping grounds.
That's funny. That's actually where my dad moved from. He had his own practice in Seattle, and then we moved to Gig Harbor. So I grew up in Gig Harbor, and I left because, as you know, in Gig Harbor, there's like no gyms there.
Yeah.
so there's no gyms there. So as a personal trainer, I was like, well, hard to be a trainer here. So I moved across the bridge. That's how I ended up over here in Lakewood.
Nice. Well, I mean, that's kind of Lakewood's kind of a sketchy place in some areas, so you better be careful.
Yeah. Fortunately, I live right next to the Oakbrook Golf Course, so it's pretty nice.
Nice. Well, good
Not
deal.
bad. Well, and ironically, I'm in Salt Lake City, so we're very near Ogden, actually. So,
wow.
Pretty funny. It's you're sort of checking both the boxes today.
That's perfect. I was just in Salt Lake a couple months ago, actually, for an event.
Nice. Skiing, I hope.
Yeah. No, it was a therapy event, but had a great time, and yeah, I love it there. You guys are so open. Like it's like COVID doesn't exist over there.
Yeah, no, it's totally Wild West here. I was talking to some friends we have in Spain, and they're just barely coming out of lockdowns again for like their third or fourth lockdown. And I'm like, yeah, no, we haven't had anything for like a year. And they're just like, sad day. So anyway, so for good or for bad, yeah, it's totally Wild West out here. So let's get into a little bit about your background. Obviously, we know a little bit about you, so we can sort of riff. But for the people listening, will you tell us just a little bit about your background, where you are, and what you do?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what I do is I help six-figure entrepreneurs overcome feeling plateaued and burnt out, so they can have the ultimate lifestyle freedom and health. And that's what I do. Really, it comes from having to solve my own problem. My first initial problem I had growing up was I was overweight, and my brother had this killer fast metabolism. We're literally 13 months apart. My brother's birthday is December 21st, mine's January 1st. And so it's like we were like best buds. And then something happened where I ended up getting really big and he stayed really skinny. And we ate the same exact food, just different metabolisms. And by the time I was in the third grade, I weighed 155 pounds. Wow. It was pretty good weight for an 8-year-old. And that was the first problem I had to solve. And I remember the experience of every summer, and Gig Harbor can be lovely. It's right by the water. Is I would always wear a sweater. I didn't want anyone to see what I look like underneath all my rolls. I know in my man boobs is how I experienced them. And really, really just was like, wow, am I going to go into high school feeling like this for the rest of my life? And decided I wasn't. And I made some changes. I did as much research as I could about health and fitness. That's really how I got started in health and fitness, was solving that problem for myself. And then as I decided I wanted to help people with that problem, I realized, wow, they have a lot of other problems. I remember my first client, her name was Heather, my first personal training client. And she was a single mom, working all the time, really wanted to be in a relationship. And she wanted to improve herself so she would be more attractive, so she'd be more desirable and really love herself. And I realized that doing physical development wasn't just physical, it was really personal development. And the problems that I started to help people solve and solve for myself were the ones that I started to see. And as I grew the business and as I started to have a team and as I started to have more desires in my life, I got married and I have a 2-year-old son. I realized that there are more problems that as business owners, we take on, and we can create our plateaus and we can feel burnt out. And that's really why I do what I do, was from a young age having these what felt like unsolvable problems and a high desire to solve them.
Yeah,
That's
I love
amazing.
that. I think that's a really great story. And, and I'm actually just sort of reflecting on my own life. I've always carried some extra weight, and I have a young son right now that's sort of struggling as well. We have one boy who's tall and skinny, and the other boy is built more like me. I mean, he's going to be tall, he's in all that, but he's going to carry some extra weight. And so we're constantly working on this weight loss stuff, right? And I would say that we're not actually doing all that well, but we sure try. And so it's really interesting or cool to hear a story like yours that began so young, but you found it within yourself. And I think that that's a good point to talk about, is that, not, I mean, you can learn things from coaches and people can tell you things, but ultimately this whole thing is self-improvement. It is, you have to buy into the message, or you have to buy into what you're trying to do if you want to find success. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, well, 100%, Brian. It's like, the techniques are free, man. You can go Google them. They're online. And so losing weight it's not a strategy issue. It's a mindset issue. It's a mindset of how they think about it. They have to think about it a certain way that successful people in their health think about health. And if they don't think about it that way, they just ride the roller coaster of lose some weight, gain some weight, lose some weight, gain some weight. A lot of times people say, well, it's lifestyle. Well, lifestyle is determined by decisions you make, and decisions you make are made because of your beliefs. And so if your beliefs aren't attuned to the kind of beliefs and mindsets that create health, then all the strategy in the world becomes irrelevant.
So when you initially started training and took on that first client, that had to be kind of hard for you, coming as someone that was struggling with those issues yourself, and now you're actually teaching people how to get past those issues. How much of it is essentially just having someone like a coach or someone like your students holding you accountable, and vice versa, to stay on the right path? I mean, there seems to be like it's easy for someone to kind of just live their own life, do their own thing, eat whatever cheeseburger they want, do what they want. But once you have that other person kind of holding you accountable, it kind of seems to change things a little bit and helps a ton, I think. Can you maybe walk through that first couple clients in the first year of actually coaching, and how your life changed and how you learned as a coach to help people?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. When it came to me, really, like, I had reached the body composition I really wanted at that point, like in terms of weight. So, I was 155 pounds when I was 8. By the time I got to being 18, 19, which is when I really started working with clients, I was still only 155 pounds. I managed to keep the weight off. And so I was doing kickboxing. I was doing all these other things. And the clients that I attracted at that point were really clients that wanted to lose body fat. So I had lost the body fat. I could teach them the lessons. I could teach them the thinking around the discipline. And so that's generally who I attracted. Then I ran into a different issue, which was, I was like, okay, I'm a 155-pound male. That's not exactly the king of the dating pool. So I was like, I want to date, I want to date the top tier women that I desire. And so I transformed. I said, I got a second transformation. It's always a constant growth process. So for me at that point, it was, how do I put on lots of muscle? How do I become really like visually, aesthetically pleasing for the kind of people that I want to be with? And so then I went on a different journey. So it's kind of like when we take clients on, let's say in a business realm, sometimes it's like, okay, first you got to get profitable. Great. So you've got to identify what are the services you're really passionate about selling, and can you sell them? So then once you can do that, well, do you always want to be in your business, or do you want it to be passive? So then can you develop a team and train them to duplicate what you're doing so you can step away from the business? So there are just different levels, and health and fitness, it's really the same. Like currently what I really specialize in helping clients with is we've done the body composition. We can help them lose fat. They want to gain muscle, we can help them gain muscle. And the area that my team really focuses on helping people with now is really the lifestyle and holistic health, but also a lot of work around their blood chemistry. So like, is this person someone who long-term is going to be around for their family because they actually have good blood levels? A lot of people don't really know how to read those. So the goal changes, and depending on the goal, use a different method. But one of the things that you said earlier that I really love is your clients, they're in your experience because they're really trying to teach you the lessons. You're either there to teach them or they're there to teach you. And so whether it's like, wow, I'm addicted to cheeseburgers, and I happen to meet a client who says, hey, help me, I'm addicted to cheeseburgers. That's perfect, because the client, you're attracting them. They're already there and they're attracted to you because of the lessons you need to learn and the lessons they need to teach you and you teach them. And there's always a beautiful harmony around that.
I love that. Can you maybe break down the blood analysis portion that you just mentioned? Because that really intrigues me. I've thought about kind of going and doing some tests and just trying to see what I should or shouldn't be doing in the past. And I've done as much as maybe doing the Google search. So if you could break that down a little more, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. I'd love to, it can be, I could talk about it all day. It can be really complex, but I'll just kind of share my story of how I got into it. So like just eating like broccoli and chicken, all these things like asparagus, you think like all these healthy things like, oh, I'm just going to be like really shredded. I'm going to be really healthy. And what I ran into was I actually had, and it's kind of embarrassing, but for a while I was like, I don't know what's going on, but my butt always itches. My butt always itches. I've got itchy booty hole. I cannot sleep. I've got a new son. I was like, am I having like a neurotransmitter hormone issue from having a new baby? And so I went on this search. I hired all these top end coaches. I hired another set of coaches. They made all these recommendations. And what I actually ended up discovering after working with all these coaches that actually stopped the itching was I created a bacterial overgrowth from actually eating too much, what's called fructooligosaccharides, which are the stalk of the asparagus, the stalk of the broccoli. They're basically a complex molecule structure that doesn't break down in your gut effectively. And so bacteria feeds it. So if you've got excessive levels of bacteria, it will actually create all sorts of issues for you. And it's not something that most people know how to look for, is one of the things. So I'd gone and tried to find a lot of answers. And essentially what I discovered is that the ranges, and even more, I had someone that worked for me that was just a fantastic human being, really my best friend. And she passed away at 36.
I'm sorry.
And she passed away, and she had gone to doctors. They'd done blood panels, and they're like, yeah, you're overweight. So of course you're having these problems. And when they did her autopsy, they found she had enlarged liver. She had enlarged heart. She basically became type 1.5 diabetic. So she wasn't able to process blood sugar anymore. And she passed out by herself, hit her head on the toilet, and died. And these kind of things just baffled me, because I was like, how did she go pay for all this testing, go to see all these professionals, and now she's no longer on the planet anymore? And what I realized and what I learned down the road by trying to solve this problem for myself is that the ranges that your doctor's using, and my dad and I talk about this a lot, well, the ranges your doctor's using are ranges based off giving you pharmaceuticals. So if you're not in the range to give you, let's just say, metformin, okay, if they look at your blood sugar, they go, oh, your blood sugar's high. You got to get a little healthier, right? Like your doctor says that. So then go hire someone to get that better. Or if you don't fix that, I'm going to have to put you on drugs. So you come back and they go, this is your last warning. You're about to get drugs. And then boom, you go back and now you're on metformin for life. Let's just say that's the scenario, because they're using a range that's designed to really look at, like, do you need this drug or not? Now, the ranges that you actually need to use for, let's just say, are you healthy and do you have other problems? Those are different ranges. Those aren't medical ranges. Those are ranges used by different kinds of providers. And so when someone goes to get blood work and you want to see, okay, like, for example, CO2, we'll just talk about a really simple one like carbon dioxide, CO2. Well, you need that enough oxygen in order to create hydrochloric acid. If you don't have enough of that, you cannot digest your food, which means if it's sitting in there rotting, what's going to happen is you're going to feed whatever bacteria is really, really advantageous. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so using different kind of correlations, you can figure out what the conversion problems people are having, the kind of liver stress they're having. You can basically help somebody make these changes before they're stuck on medications, or unfortunately, like my friend, before they pass away and they end up with some of these life-altering conditions.
Yeah, that's amazing. I never really, like realized that there's that much involved in just like your oxygen levels or this or that can affect your body's an amazing thing is what I'm trying to say. and it's neat that you can break that down and help people kind of take those steps necessary before now you're on insulin, now you need this, now you need that. And I've seen that happen in my own life with family members where now they're taking 8 pills a day, and if they stop with one, it affects the other, and it's like they're playing this juggling act. And I'm trying to avoid that if possible.
Yeah. And that's definitely, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love doing these kind of interviews and these kind of shows, because, as entrepreneurs, we get so focused on, like, I have a client that is a $20 million company, but if he's not around for his family because of the kind of problems that are going on, then he is never going to get to really enjoy what he's built.
Love that.
And that was the situation that I found myself in, is I built this company, but I did not have the lifestyle, the habits, the way of being to really actually enjoy and have fun in my life. And so what did I really build it for? And I find with a lot of entrepreneurs, they will work really hard. They will be, entrepreneurs are some of the hardest working people on the planet. You can put 12 hours in, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. And something as simple as, let's say, for example, like if you ever heard of adrenal fatigue, like people burn themselves out. Well, you can actually test for how close you are to that. Most people don't know that. You can do salivary, they can test your saliva for how much you have in reserve. So I could literally work with the client and say, hey, just based off where you're at, I can tell you that you're probably headed to burnout in about 3 months. And if we don't start making some changes, you're going to have a hard time waking up. You're going to be reaching for more coffee. You're going to be throwing it back. You're going to feel very little get up and go, and you're just really going to struggle. And we can just make some simple changes to create a buffer and allow you to keep building your business without losing kind of where you're headed right now. And, those are the kind of things that I think most people just don't know about. And so, one day they just say, I had to stop everything and it wasn't worth it. And for me, I go, well, it's really about like you can have both, but you have to have enough awareness around the problem to be able to have both. If you only build it one way, then it will catch up to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, most people, I run with a lot of entrepreneur types, and very rarely do you hear them talking about any of this kind of stuff, right? Most of them are nose down in their business and they're doing all they can to get the work done, myself included, but, often pay a little credence to our own maintenance, taking care of ourselves. I would like to jump back real quickly to something that Mike said when he'd asked his last question, where he was talking about your going into work as a trainer after having struggled with weight loss yourself. And I think that there's something interesting in there around mindset and around, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome. So this is obviously something that a lot of people deal with, a lot of entrepreneurs and people in general, even when they're trying to maybe change their lives or change their business, they struggle with their own personal image of who they are, or, maybe I'm not known as the fitness guy, so it would be weird if I started running every day. So instead, I'm just not going to run every day. And so, so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about overcoming sort of that imposter syndrome, basically being able to say, okay, well, I struggled with my weight loss. That makes me qualified to do this coaching versus the alternative where I was heavy. What do I have to tell people?
Yeah, I love that question, Ryan. I remember being at a personal training convention where all the trainers are sitting around there. And if just picture, like, close your eyes, you're a trainer, you walk into a room, it's all these other trainers. Just imagine what they all look like, all the different body shapes. And people start getting insecure right away. Can you picture that? It's like, oh my gosh, look at that guy's arms. Look how shredded. Oh, look how big those guys, it's like, look how big that guy is. Like, I just saw that guy lift 800 pounds. And so the comparison becomes so severe. And that happens in the entrepreneur world as well. And the thing that really helped me is when I thought about it, and it was like, someone said this to me and I don't forget it. They said, would you rather have, if you had to go fight Evander Holyfield, would you rather have Mike Tyson train you for a day or Mike Tyson's boxing trainer train you for a day? And it was like, it became so clear to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Mike Tyson is an athlete. He's just abnormal, but his boxing trainer creates athletes. And so really what you want to think about is, because you struggle, it gives you the authority to teach. And I've seen this with so many trainers. There'll be trainers that are just naturally genetically super gifted. They look fantastic. They really struggle to coach people because it comes so easy for them. They don't have to think about putting their body in the right position. They don't think about some of them don't even have to think about their nutrition. I remember there's this one guy, he was like 50 and he was shredded. And he's like, you know what my secret is? He went, McDouble hamburgers. I just eat McDoubles every day after I train arms. Tried it with his clients, definitely didn't work. But like, it's like, and he couldn't get it because it came so easily to him. And so to really be someone who trains people, to be someone who can generate a result for people, to actually have this struggle yourself and be able to work with people that are struggling, that's such a huge gift. And the problem that we really want to solve for the world is the problem that we've had to solve for ourselves. And that's what gives us the authority. It's not just being great at it. It's not having a natural disposition to it, because those people are uncompetently competent. And an incompetent, as someone who's unconsciously competent, they can't articulate how to teach you. And this is really common in sales. There'll be a lot of people that are sales trainers and they're just naturally good at sales. They're like, hire me for sales coaching, but they actually don't know all the things that go into them being good at sales. And so when their clients struggle, they really don't have an approach for how to approach that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it makes a lot of sense because, it's just, I also think, a lot of times this imposter syndrome idea is just a excuse or fear or something, versus even really being real, right? So a lot of times we're holding ourselves up for some other undetermined condition or some other reason rather than just, and imposter syndrome is easy to say because it's kind of the thing du jour. So I think that's a great, the way you've laid it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're resonating with it. And I think, it's really interesting. Like my wife's an entrepreneur as well. And she doesn't do the exact same thing as me, but we both do coaching and consulting. I'll watch the clients that she brings in be completely different than the clients that I would bring in. And it's really, really beautiful because that client would never sign up with me, but they really resonate with her. And so being who you are and a high expression of your own self is really essential for actually having the right kind of clientele, people that you work easily with. If you try to make yourself like somebody else because you feel like an imposter, what ends up happening is you actually end up attracting the wrong people. And then you go, wow, business is really difficult. And then I'll see tons of entrepreneurs that go, yeah, like I'm really struggling. And what it really comes from is they're afraid of being an imposter. So they copy someone they think will be successful, which just makes them an imposter. And they keep attracting more imposters in. Do you see how that works? So they're thinking around how to solve the problem in the first place is what creates the problem.
Yeah, you know what? I think we're done, right? Just drop the mic right there. That's incredible.
I love that the authenticity portion is something to me that really, you have to stand for something and be authentic. It's like there's so many people trying to copy Gary Vee or copy this guy or do that. Just be yourself. Tell your experiences and people will resonate with that. That's my personal opinion anyway. So I love how you pointed that out. Let's talk about the switch from training to sales. I mean, did you pick up a Zig Ziglar book and go sell some Cutco knives and that was your start?
Yeah, that was exactly it. No, it's funny. I laugh at that because one of my clients who has a business, he was one of the top Cutco salespeople. He was actually the district manager. He would do over 6-figure a year in sales. We
might have interviewed him.
For Cutco.
We interviewed a guy that does that. He does he'll do like the engravings on the Cutco knives and send them to the real estate agents. And he was a top producer, and he might be your client. You'll have to go look through our roster. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, my client's name is Daniel. I know he didn't do the engravings because he doesn't sell Cutco anymore. Okay. He did it. Basically, it was an overhead percentage. Long story short, he was like, yeah, I'd make over 6 figures, but I didn't actually profit 6 figures. So he didn't stay in that business forever. But I love this question. Like, how did I end up in sales? Well, I had a problem, and my problem was this. I love training people. I couldn't get anyone to buy training from me.
Okay.
And I went, I don't know if you've ever been to a big box gym and you've signed up. So I used to work at a Bally Total Fitness, and new members would come in and you get one free personal training session. I don't know if you've ever signed up for a membership, you get one free personal training session. So that's obviously a sales pitch. The personal trainer calls you.
Sale gym memberships back in the day.
You did? Okay.
I was that guy.
We're totally aligned. So you had a sales role. I did not have a sales role, but they gave me the job to sell. And that was hard for me. That was really difficult for me. You just picture it. Like, I studied for my training cert at 17. So I'm 18 years old and I'm making cold calls all day long in Tacoma, Washington. I'm like, hey, I just saw you signed up for a gym membership. Would love, phone hangs up. So I really started doing sales. I was doing cold calls and I was like, wow, I'm losing money. There's a toll bridge to get to the city. It's like a 40-minute commute from Gig Harbor to Tacoma. I'm losing money on the toll bridge trying to get clients sitting there doing cold calls. And that's my training career. And I really wow, I hated it. I just hated it. And I said to myself, I hate sales, but I love training. I said that to myself at 18 years old. And I said, if the thing I need to do in order to do what I love is learn sales, I'm willing to do it. And so I kept on doing it. I kept on trying to practice. And what's really interesting is I got a training position at a different gym where I didn't have to do any sales. And I was getting paid less, but I didn't have to do any sales. I thought it was a total win-win. I worked on my skill set. And then one day I decided, well, guess what, Mike? I wanted to open my own gym. So I had a sales problem again. See how that works? Yeah. So the original problem came back to haunt me, and I hired a sales coach. And I had quite a bit of skill set, like competency wise. I was the head trainer of the gym. Like, people knew me. I'd go out to eat at a restaurant. Someone would walk up to me and be like, man, you do great work with your clients. If we were ever going to hire a trainer, you'd be the only one we'd ever hire. It was like I had that kind of skill set, but I could not get people to buy from me. And it was super frustrating. And I hired my first sales coach. I've had a few sales coaches, but her name was Jennifer. I hired her, and she really just helped me actually learn some of the soft skills around sales. And some of the soft skills that I hadn't thought about were like, do you actually empathize with someone's problem enough where you hear them? Do they hear their own problem back and realize where they're stuck? It was things where it was point selling, and point selling is where you take what they're saying and there's a solution to the point that they made. It was that system, and I did it. I practiced it for a while, and it got me a really great breakthrough. And I still had limitations in my own belief, though. So what happened was I basically went, okay, I got a sales coach. Now I'm charging about $200 a session, which is great. But at the same time, I can only do so many sessions. So then I'm making like $225 an hour, but I go, wow, like I'm kind of plateaued out. And it didn't occur to me to raise my rates, because I went, well, who's going to pay more than $225 an hour? And that's when I hired a different coach and really learned at that point, what I was going through, Mike. I don't know if you've ever been this. It was like a career crisis. I always joke to my wife, every other year. Okay, great. every 5 years for me, like clockwork, I start becoming dissatisfied with the work I'm doing. And so what it looked like was I was a trainer. I was training people. Great. Okay. I got to open my own gym. That was my dissatisfaction. Everyone's doing it wrong. Got to open my own gym. Got to have my own thing. Open that. Okay. Now what? Well, I'm really dissatisfied with being a gym owner. So I want to be a therapist, because trainers, it's like people are hurt. They need more therapy. So then I went back to school, became a therapist. And then I got dissatisfied with being a therapist, making a couple $100s an hour. And I went, well, what I really want to do is help people with lifestyle change. I want to do more holistic work, but I had no idea how to do that, because to go from like, okay, I'm going to tell you about how to eat and these other things to, hey, I'm going to talk to you about your relationships. I'm going to talk to you about life decisions, those kind of things. I had no idea how to do that. So I had hired several coaches, but I ended up hiring one specific coach. And the thing that we really looked at was how I thought about everything. And what I realized was by working with how people thought about things, like we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome, how it just creates us being an imposter. If you really understand how people think, what it allows you to do is allows you to predict the behavior they're going to create and give them the option if they want to continue using that way of behavior. And that's actually the thing that got me really, really out of my business. And within hiring this coach and doing this work, I was able, in the first 5 days, I sold my first, I think it was $18,500 program paid in full for health and fitness.
Wow.
And that was my very first coaching client. So within 5 days of hiring him and practicing it, and I realized I was really good at it. And what happened was someone that had hired him before called me, the guy that referred me actually, and was like, wow, I worked with this guy for over a year. I never sold anything. That's twice of what I've ever sold. How did you do it? And I really didn't have an answer for him. I was like, I don't know how I did it. And then what I found is I kept repeating the process. $30,000 clients, $50,000 clients, $60,000 clients. And I was able to actually leave my gym completely, have it just make passive income, and really focus on helping people with coaching. And then people started coming up to me and going like, hey, I'm a health and fitness trainer. Do you think you could help me sell? I was like, I guess why not? Let's try it. And I found I was really good at it. I had clients that they were able to duplicate high-end ticket models and bring in 15K clients, 20K clients. And that's actually what I realized was all the coaching I'd done since I was 17 years old as a trainer and helping people make decisions around their health, that had actually created a skill set for me of helping people make decisions around their business. And specifically the area that I was really passionate about, because it moved me so quickly. Within 6 months of getting into high ticket sales, I was able to travel the world. I went to Scotland. I went to Australia. I was able to buy our dream house. I was able to completely get out of my gym. Within 6 months, I was like, wow, nothing had ever been that impactful as learning high ticket sales. And that's what really inspired me to teach people and become a sales trainer and be able to help my clients make the money to be able to travel, to take time off, to pay off their wife's student loans. That's really how I ended up doing it, but it was kind of an accident.
Yeah, I love that story. And I want to talk maybe a little bit about the front half of that bit, which is the prospecting and converting a prospect into a high ticket item. So, not everybody, and like I happen to sell services also, but I work in like a creative service realm. And so in my world, we're constantly trying to sell websites or graphic design jobs or brand packages or whatever it is. But there's a mix of people who come looking for that work, right? There's your sort of budget crowd, the people who are looking to price shop you. There are the people who don't really know what they want anyway, but they're still taking your time for a meeting. And then there's the people who know what they actually want and they're willing to pay for it. Do you have any techniques or any ideas or things that you've come across in your process that allows you to sort of, I guess, be known as the high ticket guy so that when people come to you, they're sort of pre-qualified?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's when I get quite often. It's like, how do you get high ticket clients? Like, where do they come from based off the pool of people you have? And the answer is they're actually already there. So they're already there. What changes for you when you want to sell a high ticket program is the way you show up and the level of conversation you have with your potential client. And whether they buy from you or not, when they leave the conversation, they go, wow, that was a high ticket, high truth conversation. And if you do it correctly, they should not wonder why you're high ticket. They should leave going, yeah, like that is high ticket. And they should kind of lose some sleep. Oftentimes people will tell me, I lost sleep thinking about not signing up with you because of the level of conversation we had. So it's about really generating yourself. And that can be hard because a lot of times people want to rely on like, oh, should your branding be better? Should your messaging be better? And like those things can help. But the biggest thing that creates high ticket clients faster than anything else, and this is what I practice and I teach, it's really the level of conversation you have with the client, and they have to come to the conclusion themselves that they need to buy your service. You can't tell them. They have to actually decide they want it. Otherwise, they trigger ego. And when they trigger ego, they'll take themselves out of making any kind of decision that would create change, because ego's job is to keep them right where they're at and hold them there. It's a survival mechanism. So the psychology of how you do that is really important.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially for younger people in my field specifically, I know they really struggle with this, where they kind of get beat up by their clients and people come in and basically, try and manipulate the person they're shopping from. They're not actually looking for a high ticket thing and they don't really want your advice. And I think part of that is trust. And I think some of it too is the foundational stuff we've been talking about so far with, knowing who you are and being authentic and representing yourself in a proper way. So, but you mentioned in your response there something about the type of conversation you're having. And I think, part of this, colloquially, it's known as the sales conversation. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about what that looks like. So, assuming that our young budding entrepreneur is confident in the work they do, they're competent about, what they do and how it can deliver on a promise. But how do we then, I guess, articulate that or talk to our clients in a way that's we're not convincing, rather we're allowing them to sell themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about this all day. So I'm glad you asked this question, Ryan. You have to ask them questions. So they have to. So one of the things, it's like people hate being told. It's just like people hate being sold, but they love to buy. You see that people love to buy stuff. They hate being sold. And so as soon as we tell someone like, this is what you need, they automatically resist it. But when they say, wow, I really need that, they're sold on it.
You know, that's so like my entire life, if my dad tells me go mow the lawn, I resent him. I'm like, I don't want to go mow the lawn. But if
Right.
he asks me to go mow the lawn and he says, will you go mow the lawn? Just that simple change from telling me to do something to asking me to do something changes my entire mindset. And that's in every field of work, everything I've done. If someone tells me to do something, I'm like, if someone asks me to do something, I'm like, sure, yeah, no problem. I'll bend over backwards for you. It's the approach. And I think that's kind of what you're hinting towards here with this, is when in the sales process, you kind of ask leading questions like, what do you think of your website right now? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And let them come to the conclusions, and then they're more approachable. Is that kind of what you're
exactly. You have to lead them through questions, but you can't be like, yeah, your website looks like shit.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, they have to come to the conclusion. So how people usually try to do this, let's say you go to an event, right? And someone's talking about, like, for example, I hired a $30,000 website guy, right? For branding and whatnot. Now, what he didn't do was tell me my website was shit. What he actually did was he taught me, this is really common. He taught me all the things that make a great website. And then I looked at my website and went, what do I think about this? Okay. So that's the common way that people try to do it. And if you're like sponsoring events, if you're doing these kind of things, then that can be great. But if you're on a sales call, how does this translate? Okay. What you have to do is you have to actually know, like, okay, what are the kind of questions that I'm going to ask and how deep do I need to take this? So like, what's one of the services you offer, Ryan? Maybe we can just make it really practical for you.
Yeah. I mean, just for simplicity's sake, let's just talk websites. We'll just say, cool. Hey, we do websites.
Okay. And what's a program around websites that you'd really love to sell, like of a package or something?
In our case, it would be sort of like let's say just sort of a full service website, front end, back end on a content management platform, like a WordPress or something like that.
Okay. And what's that cost?
It ranges, but it could be 30 to 100 grand.
30 to 100 grand. Great. So let's say the guy comes to you about his website, right? And you say, hey, what made you want to book a call today? What made you want to get on a call? And he goes, well, I'd like to get some ideas around my website. You were offering a free call, so I thought I'd come. Right? Like, have you ever heard that before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is what we call someone who's like, hey, I'm just taking advantage of the situation. So what you have to do is you have to establish a intention for the call, because you know his intention right now is like, I'm just trying to get some value. It's free. So what you could say is, well, I'd love to set an intention for this call so you can get fully served from this call. How does that sound to you? And he'll say, yeah, that sounds great. See, what I'd love to do is hear about what's going on in your experience with websites. I'd like to see if there's a problem with your website, what you're experiencing with your website, and if there's any urgency to solve that problem. And if there is, see if it makes sense for us to do work together. How does that sound to you? And he'll go, great. So what you've just done there is you've said, hey, like, I'm going to ask you questions about your website. I'm going to be the authority around the website. I'm going to ask you questions about what you're unhappy with around your website. I'm going to see if there's actually urgency, because the only reason people buy is if they're urgent. I'm going to see if there's urgency for you to actually buy. And then I'm going to offer you a program at the end. And he just gave you permission to do it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And I've seen in, some sales processes, I think there's a thing called the like Sanders submarine or something like that, where basically one of the steps though is this permission to move forward kind of step. And I think it's really important that you called that out, because it's one thing to just have that conversation and then just end on it. But that ability to sort of ask for permission for the next call or for the next topic or for the next meeting or whatever it is, that little bit of asking for permission, I think, can be all the difference.
Yeah, it's so massive, because many of us are afraid to actually, especially if we have any money stuff ourselves, we don't really want to ask people like, hey, can I pitch you something? Right? It's like, hey, can I ask you for 100 grand? Right. So like part of us resist that. And so then if you're in resistance to having that conversation around money, you'll manifest people that are in resistance to giving you the money. Just like we talked about earlier with the whole imposter syndrome, like that resistance will actually show up in the sales call. And so you have to get rid of that at the beginning by actually saying, hey, if it makes sense, I'm going to ask you for money at the end. And then you ask their permission and they give it to you. And so then let's say that's the first part. So now you're not in resistance to the money. They're also like, if they were actually not interested in doing anything but picking your brain, they would say, actually, I just want you to answer these 2 questions. Then what you could do is like, awesome, let's talk about that. I'd love to give you value. Boom, I answer these 2 questions. Is there anything else I can do for you today? And then they can leave, you can leave, and you're not sitting there for an hour going like, man, this guy's never going to buy from me. And you just gave them value. So it allows you really quickly to identify what kind of call are we having? What's the intention of the call? And both people to be on the same page. And it also keeps the conversation in integrity because both of you have made an agreement around what the call is about.
I like that.
Well, and I think too, there's one step in there too, where this type of conversation, where it's very permission driven, helps sort of alleviate people's snap response to problems. So, you know, like you mentioned, when you mentioned the money, like some people, you know, they'll get that little butt pucker and they don't want to talk about money. But generally speaking, at least in my experience, if you're talking to a business leader or talking to somebody, you know, who runs a company and is trying to talk to a marketing agency, for example, in our case, you know, they already understand that stuff costs money. And so when you come right out and you say a cost, there's that fear of sticker shock, right? But if you've sort of asked your way into this and they understand it's going to be expensive by virtue of the conversation you've just had and everything else, then the shock isn't so grand, you know, and I think that is all part of what you're sort of setting up by way of this sort of permission-based conversation.
Right, exactly. And it's, you know, things are only expensive based off what you compare them to. So if you've got a 100K product and the person's saying it's expensive, they're usually comparing it to the wrong thing. And so you not getting clear on what it is they want to create and finding out the dollar value of that can actually create price hesitation in yourself. And then we get our own little butt pucker before we say the price.
Well, and I think that's a fair observation. You know, I think about it like with cars, for example, right? I mean, if all you really need is 4 doors and, 4 wheels and a motor so that you can get to work, well, then, you know, I mean, you can go buy yourself a Toyota Yaris or whatever for $9,000. You maybe buy it used for less. And, or you can buy a, G-Wagon or something for $220,000, with flat black paint and whatever you want, right? But ostensibly they're the same thing. And so, so again, what's the difference, right? Where's the value at? And you can,
the difference is between a WordPress site and a custom built software application for what you're trying to achieve. That's the and trying to express that to a client in a way where they'll understand this took me 10 minutes. I downloaded a template. I changed a few things, uploaded it. Now you have a website versus I spent a month building an API for the back end for this to work. There's huge differences, but I think part of the process is just informing your client as to why, you're paying for a Honda or a Cadillac or the G-Wagon with flatback paint.
I think that's right. Just pile on your website metaphor, right? I mean, you've got your Wix where they can pay $9 a month or whatever and build their own, and so all the way up to the fully custom build. And so much of that conversation, the value conversation, is in determining, what is important to them and what is necessary and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that helping people understand that is part of the process, but you get there through this, permission-based, question asking instead of trying to come from a position where you know it all.
Right. And I love this conversation. I don't know if you knew this, but my background's actually in information technology. I went to school for network servers and whatnot. So, one of the things that I'm really is like, I'm a very technical person, which is great for health, but I don't know if you've ever been in to talk to a health practitioner and they overteach you about health. It totally blows your mind. And you're just like, all right, well, I have no idea what's going on here. And one of the problems is the confused mind does nothing. And so once they've got confusion or overwhelm, they shut down and they no longer become open to a solution. And a lot of times with someone who is very technical, that has to move into a sales role, which is what happened to me. Is I was very technical about all the health stuff. And then I was like, wow, that person left that meeting. I felt like they learned so much and they didn't buy anything. It's crazy to me. They're going to learn all that and then go and do the exact same thing they did before the meeting. And that really let me know I'm having a disconnect in my sales process. And this happened to me all the time in therapy. And what I realized is you have to find one thing that the person really can understand and agree on And that becomes the point you sell around. If you introduce multiple concepts and multiple things, you overwhelm the person. And if they don't move forward after the initial conversation, you're not able to help them. So in order to get them served in the first conversation, you have to find that piece of information that they can actually understand well enough to say, I want to make a decision. And in marketing, we call this the awareness around the problem. And so if someone has a current awareness around the problem, well, great. Let's say they think about their thinking as negative thinking. I'm overweight, so I think negatively. Let's just say that's the problem. Let's take websites. Okay. So if they go, oh, I don't have enough leads, this is a website problem. That's their current level of awareness. So they come to you and they go, okay, I have a website problem. I'm not getting enough leads. What can you do? So right now they're only thinking about leads. Now, if you go into like, okay, let's talk about your website. Let's talk about these other things. They may actually shut down because they're like, well, he's not really addressing the issue. But if you said, tell me about the kind of leads you'd like to have on your website. And they go, well, I'd like to have 20 leads a month. I only have 2 right now. And then you said, where do people find you for your website? Okay. Then what they go, well, they find me through, I don't know, social media. Okay. I don't know if you're ever, so yeah, they backlink through the social media, right? And then you ask them this question, why do you think you have 18 less leads a month than you want? Because now you're understanding what they're relating their problem to. So then they go, well, I think I have 18 less leads a month because I'm not on Instagram. And if I was backlinking to Instagram, it would solve the problem. So do you see, now you're understanding their level of awareness around the related problem. If I just go into, well, your SEO search term keywords are actually incorrect, and you don't have a site that allows me to actually do SEO keywords, they're going to resist that solution because you haven't addressed what they actually think the problem is. And as long as they think that's the problem, they'll make decisions that continue creating their problem.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when it comes to highly technical things like websites or whatever. I mean, most people don't have a deep technical knowledge, and, maybe they've got somebody on staff they can lean on or whatever, but ultimately your stakeholder themselves may not actually have that much knowledge around it. And they are trying to solve a specific thing. So sort of, working that out of them by way of this conversation, I think is really important.
So yeah, Ryan, that logo on your shirt right there is a good example of, like the $1 million logo design package versus the guy from community college that just learned Photoshop making your logo for you. That's an object that's kind of intangible. Like why pay $1 million for a logo versus, $500 kind of thing. That's something that I think would be a little bit harder to sell than like your car, or your website, or this or that. Cause it's like, you can kind of almost get there with the $500, but why pay?
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up, Mike, because one of my clients actually is the graphic designer for the Seattle Sounders.
Oh, nice.
And so we showed him how to sell, okay. So he does sell high ticket graphic design. Okay. So, and the way that people usually try to sell is they're like, wow, you want your logo to look like this? That guy doesn't know what he's doing. What you have to be is like, what do you want your logo to do for your company? You have to understand that.
It's amazing how you just pivot that question and it makes so much sense. Once you pivot it and word it a certain way, it's kind of like, okay, now you got the client thinking like, what am I trying to get out of this? Why is he better than this guy? It just by one simple question and changing, like getting them thinking about it is right, kind of,
because they're going to purchase it. Right, Mike? So the only thing that matters is actually what they think.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I'll actually just make a sale by asking them, what do you think would happen if we work together? What do you think would happen with your logo? What do you think would happen for your company with that logo? Is that happening worth this investment? And they'll say yes. But I have to ask them. I can't tell them any of that. Does that make sense? And so like the way you'd sell the logo, okay, is you have to be in service of why they want that logo to be different. It's really coming from a place of service. So like, what would you want your logo to do for your company? Now, if they go, well, really, I just need it so it can be on a website, then I'd ask them, well, what do you want that website to do when people visit it? You see that? So I'm going deeper into the questioning. But if they were like, literally like, well, I just need something so it's on there. I mean, they could get a letterhead, right? Yeah. So then I would even ask them like, well, if you really just need your name there, why don't you just get a letterhead? And they might actually say, this is an intrinsic buying question. They go, well, the feeling I'd have around my company if I just put something up was it would represent me poorly. You see that? And now I can explore those emotions and then get really clear, like, okay, this person is avoiding a consequence around his own self-esteem, and that's why he's going to buy. And that becomes his reason for purchasing. But the only way I'd figure that out is if I ask the questions.
Yeah. And I've heard other experts in this field sort of talk a little bit about, essentially trying to talk people out of the sale, right? Because by doing that, you're sort of negating all of the roadblocks that might pop up down the road. So through this questioning, you're essentially saying, are you sure you need me? The three I know of, or the why questions I know of, or why this, why now, and why me? And so, essentially trying to talk them out of it, or, have them at least work through all these questions in their head so that they can do away with all the roadblocks before you do.
Right. Well, yeah. One of the things that's really helpful in service is to let people know that this call is actually, the intention of the call is to get clear on what you need. And some people will do kind of like a takeaway sale, which is really interesting. Like, it's like, yeah, you don't really need me for that. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend you hire me. And sometimes they do that as like a show, like a manipulation tactic. I will tell you that there's one kind of behavior style that works with a high dominant. If they're not a high dominant, the takeaway buy won't work. If they're a high dominant, it will work. And there's certain things you can listen for to understand that. But essentially, if you're just focused on helping them get clear, then you don't need to do a takeaway sale, because they'll actually, by the end of those questions, go, yeah, I need to buy from you. But there are some people that really like that takeaway sale, and it's really funny, but it tends to be, in my opinion, pretty ego driven. And
yeah, it seems like one of those things like, nah, you don't want me, so now I want you more than ever. Like, now I have to have you.
And that will really work for a high dominant. But the problem is you'll probably get that client and you won't like the way they work with you.
I was just going to say that. I was like, those are the clients I don't want to deal with, because they're more work than worth. I'd rather take someone who wants to work with me, where I don't have to pull myself out of the equation to get hook the reel, I don't want that. I want the client that wants me there is kind of what it is. And it's easy to work with. So.
Right. And I love that you said that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say there's four behavioral styles that people they respond with. Okay. And so one of the things that I find helps my sales clients, because I ran into this problem, is if you know what your behavioral styles are, you listen for your potential client to be of those behavioral styles. And if you bring those kind of clients on, you'll feel like your clients are dream clients. But if you don't know how to listen for them and you sell the wrong clients, like you're not a high dominant and you do the high dominant thing, then you'll go like, wow, this person I brought on doesn't want to do any of the work, won't implement, and they're a nightmare client. So just like you said, Mike, to affirm your point, like knowing who your clients are by how to listen for them makes your life so much easier as a business owner, especially if you're doing the fulfillment yourself. If you're just in sales and someone else is going to fulfill it, you just sell it and hand it off, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's your only job is to sell. But if you actually got to fulfill it, then if you're like me, then you want to make sure you bring on clients that you understand their behavioral style, or you're going to go like, wow, that one call, I look at it on my calendar and I want to jump off a bridge, right? I'd almost pay for that person not to be on my calendar.
I actually saw an SEO person that we interviewed a while ago just posted something on LinkedIn, and he showed the deposit amount for how much he got for the sale, how much it was, and how much he had coming in. And then after the second deposit check, he refunded them, gave them all their money back, and said it wasn't worth the money. I moved on to another client, and sorry, it's kind of empowering to be able to say, hey, I don't need this 50 grand. I don't need your money. I'll go find another client and take that 50 grand from them, or do quality work and enjoy working with them at the same time, versus dealing with your nightmare. And, that's, I would love to be able to, I'll go get another one. Right now I wouldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, when you have the sales skill set, what it allows you to do, Mike, is to actually say, and have the confidence, I can generate income through being in conversations. I'm confident in my ability to generate cash flow, and I don't have to take on clients that are going to be a total headache for me, because you can go get another one. And that's one of the reasons why I really love teaching this work, because I have clients that used to bring on headache clients, and they were like, do I even want to be an entrepreneur? And I was like, being an entrepreneur is not your problem. It's bringing on the wrong kind of clients and not being able to identify them. And that makes it really painful.
That makes sense. Hey, Isaac, I wanted to ask you here in sort of our last few minutes together, I kind of want to see if there is such a thing, and I don't know if there's a short answer to this, but sort of a prequel to our sales conversation, right? So we spent a lot of time talking about how to talk to somebody once we've got them on the phone. But can we talk a little bit about how to do a little bit of prospecting and make sure that the prospects we're attracting are the right kind before we get on the call?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really vendor specific, I guess is the way I'd put it. Like, you knowing what makes a good client for you and knowing what those qualifying questions are. So for example, like I'm really like my health team, we look for people that have already had trainers because they have really good comparison of the difference between working with us versus working with someone else. For me as a sales coach, I'm really good at working with people that have had a sales coach already because I know my sales coaching is really different. So they're not coming in completely blind and they're actually able to implement some of the things that I teach them. And so asking some of these kind of questions can be really relevant. So one of the, like I have a client that's in SEO and website design, similar to you guys. That's just my approximation because I don't really know both your businesses. But one of the things I asked her was like, based off the clients you want to generate, how do you actually need to approach them? Like, how would they think about their problem? And she went, well, they would be someone who has tried to manage it themselves, is so busy and successful now that they no longer can manage it themselves. And they're willing to pay someone to fix that problem. So then I went, one of the things that we have to do in our intake forms and asking people is we have to ask them where they're at with their business. And when they're thinking about making a decision, what are the most important things to them? That way they can screen out people that are going, the most important thing to me is the price. That makes sense. The most important thing to me is like, I need to be able to figure out how to do this myself. They go, the most important thing I need is an expert who can do it done fast and I don't have to babysit them. Boom. That's their ideal client. And so knowing your ideal client and being able to ask those questions, that's going to be really important for pre-intake leading into a sales call.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I mean, just thinking about our car metaphor from earlier, right? I mean, when you see an ad for a Toyota, I mean, not to say they're not well done or whatever, but I mean, you can tell that that's positioned for a certain type of clientele, where something like, an ad for the latest AMG Mercedes or whatever is going to be positioned totally different for a different audience. And people do the math, right? You don't have to sit and convince them, but they'll see in that advertisement something that resonates with them, or maybe it's aspirational or it seems out of reach. And so they'll say, okay, well, I'm not going to look at the Mercedes. I'm going to look at the Toyota, and so, but I think, to your point, part of it is that, it's not branding necessarily, although that can be a solution, but it is knowing who you're talking to when you're doing whatever outreach you're doing.
Right. And yeah. And the biggest problem I see is people, when they do the outreach, they're not specific enough in the outreach to attract the right people. So they use the wrong languaging. They offer the wrong kind of free events. And so they bring in this really wide net, but they're not the right people because they're not clear enough on the problem they need to solve for that specific group of person to be able to speak to that specific group of person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. I think that sounds right. So,
I think Ryan and I were both on the same page here, but do you want to tell our listeners where they can reach out and how they can get in contact with you if they have any questions and any parting shots?
Right. You can reach out to me. Best place to reach out to me is actually you can text AND to 66866. And if you text that to me, we can have a conversation on how to get clarity on how to excel in your business, your health, and your life. That's really the place that I love to help people with in all three of those areas. You can also look me up at Isaac Ho Coaching, ISAACHO Coaching, COACHING.com. Isaac Ho Coaching. You can look me up on Facebook. Is actually the only social media platform I'm really on. And you can find me at Isaac Ho Trainer, ISAACHO Trainer, like sales trainer, and Facebook.com, Isaac Ho Trainer. And that will take you directly to my Facebook page where I love to connect, and you'll see me with my family and hanging out with my son and celebrating my clients and their wins and really just enjoying life. So that's the best way to reach me and connect with me.
Nice.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Isaac. We really appreciate this call. I mean, obviously we could have gone on for days and days. So much to cover in this space, and actually more I'd love to pick your brain about. But for purposes of this show, we'll call it a day. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan and Mike. It's been a total pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you all next time.